Hi, everybody. Welcome to our weekly live stream. This is Daniella Young. I am a author, speaker, Army combat veteran, and the co-founder of Cavness HR, which is a HR company that's attempting to revolutionize HR for small businesses. I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. What we do every week is I do a deep dive into a topic about culture, something to do with workplace culture, something to do maybe even with overall culture in general, sometimes leadership, get down into the holes of it, talk about an issue. This is all written about in a blog post, which you can find on cavnesshr.com on our blog, post it all over our social media, and then we chat about it. And of course, if you're watching this live, you can feel free to reach out with comments or questions. Still trying to figure out exactly how to see those questions. Facebook is probably the best way to reach out to me while we're live, but working on that. Okay, today we are going to talk about recognizing minority contributions and how to put a focus on minority hiring and diversity hiring without compromising quality, as is the big fear that people are concerned about. So, last week, this really amazing thing happened. This woman named Audrey Gelman appeared on the cover of Inc. magazine. And it was amazing because of multiple things. She's the CEO of a successful startup. She manages an all-female executive team. But most importantly, she chose to appear visibly pregnant. And this was the first time in history that this has happened on the cover of a business magazine. So that's a big deal. I say this as a woman that's been first at something. I say this as someone that has had a baby, has tried to navigate pregnancy and birth, which can be very traumatic, which can risk women's lives and babies' lives, nursing, taking care of a small infant, and all of those things while managing a career, which I did much less successfully than Audrey. So I was super excited about this. Her appearance on the cover. Business Insider did an article about it, which I was starting to see shared all over social media. And I always go to the comments section and I'm like, cringe when I go because I know what I'm going to see. And it's kind of like I'm doing this to myself. So, what am I going to see? What was I scared of? Amidst all the congratulatory comments, you start to see the negative comments. And they're kind of masquerading because they're masquerading as false positive comments or what I like to call false wokeness. And you see it a lot on any kind of minority contribution post. Anytime we're recognizing a woman or an African American or a Native American or an LGBTQ member for anything, being the first of, being impressive of, you get this line of, when is this going to stop being news? And it's this sort of underhanded thing. I think that when we see outright misogyny, outsized racism, outright bigotry, we recognize that these days. But it's all of the sort of false wokeness. It's people that saying, "Oh my God, when are we all just going to be equal? When is this going to stop being news?" There was this one specific comment, and I'm totally paraphrasing, but it basically said, "This is so great, but I wonder when these things will stop being news. What about all of the dads that are CEOs of companies? I can't wait till we're all just equal." And specifically said, you never hear about dads being CEOs of companies. And I love this argument of when is it going to stop being news? Because the funny thing about news is like it's a very self-correcting problem. When something's not rare, it stops making the news. As long as it's making the news, journalists think that it is still rare. We can think about like Jackie Robinson was a big deal, but we no longer see stories of when African American men make it big in professional sports like baseball or football, because it has now become a lot more common. When women make it into Ivy League colleges or a woman finishes a marathon, that is no longer front page news, but it used to be. So we look back at these stark examples, which seems like, okay, we know that thinking back then was wrong, but we're still having these same arguments. Something I saw a lot of in the military, there's a lot of rhetoric of, I don't see race, I don't see color, I don't see gender, I only see green. And again, in my personal opinion, think this is a very false belief or a false, belief in equality. My experience, I commissioned into the Army as a female officer, which was not rare by any means, but was still only 11% of the population of the military at the time was female. Today it's about 17. So it actually is still rare, even though there are a lot of them. The percentage is still very low. And I'll never forget how shocked I was when I actually heard, you can't do X job because of your gender. And you could not make me believe that in America of 2009, I was still legally barred from certain things that I was totally qualified for just because I was a woman. It was crazy to me. Fast forward a few years, we're heading to Afghanistan. I get my combat vest, this thing that's supposed to protect you from bullets. And I bring up the fact that this doesn't actually protect women the way it's supposed to, because I don't know if you've noticed, but our chests are a little bit different from men's chests. And, I was just simply told, like, don't worry about it. You won't be in their direct fire. You won't be in the direct combat. Turns out that also wasn't true. In 2011, I got sort of lucky in that I was in the right place in the right time of history to be able to be a part of volunteering with this first group of women that was integrated into these all male teams doing all kinds of different ground combat operations, which was really cool. And yes, we did go on those patrols with armor that most likely would still not keep us alive if we got directly shot, which was a bit scary, let me tell you. The whole Army learned some incredible lessons. That's a whole other blog post, whole other bit that I do. But we really saw rapid change. In less than 2 years, the combat ban on women was repealed. Women were allowed to go actually receive training for the missions that we were doing alongside with the men that also got the training. They even consulted us about how to design a new combat vest that did keep us alive, which was phenomenal. And then, after that, by 2015, the first women graduated from Ranger School and the floodgates sort of opened, right? And you started seeing first women to do this, first women to do this, female infantry officers, first female special operations combat pilots, snipers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There have been a lot. This year, the first female 4-star general took over a major infantry division, which is really cool. It's this whole sort of, direct line from boots on the ground stuff that I was doing almost a decade ago now. And we learned, or the Army learned that, like we often do in these diversity situations, that a lot of the things we were scared of wasn't a problem at all. And a lot of the things that we didn't realize, we realized very, very quickly. Turns out that when you're going to war in a place where men and women are both trying to kill you, it's actually quite effective to have women on your team also, because it's almost like we have a completely different life experience and we bring all these different things to the table. So, in literally less than a decade, the military, which, by the way, is a giant organization of almost 1.3 million human beings, one of the oldest traditions in our country, saw this rapid change in less than a decade. So this brings me to, like, there's a lot of danger in the idea of we only hire the most qualified person for the job, because most qualified is a subjective argument and it's totally influenced by what is going on in history in the time, what are the political views, and who is in charge. Who is that person doing the hiring or making the laws or currently in power? There's this great book by Emily Chang called Brotopia, where she talks about how industries like tech created their own pipeline problem by how they defined what is qualified. And now, of course, they're suffering all these dangers, potential dangers from lack of tech. now you really do have a lack of qualified women and other diversities in the tech field. And we can only begin to imagine, as AI is starting to become a thing, robots are starting to become a thing, if, we create this whole world of artificial intelligence that is created by sort of one type of person or one group of person. We could lose a lot of the cultural things that we've fought for recently. And just like Jackie Robinson was qualified to play baseball, but someone had to let him through the gates. And that is so true with all of these firsts that we are seeing. Like, have pregnant women in the past been qualified to be CEOs of companies? 100%. Have they ever made it to that level of visibility? That's the difference. That's the first. And the more we see that, the more we do it. I was 100% not qualified to be running anything when I was pregnant because I was crazy pregnant lady. But, women are different. We are not all the same. Neither is any group of any minority. So it was interesting how timing works out, because the same day that all of this stuff is rattling around in my mind and, how do we do it? How do we increase diversity representation, recognize diversity contributions without this sort of compromising for quality? And then I got to attend this business pitch competition, and I'm sitting there, and I really haven't looked around the room that much. I got there late. I'm sitting there, I'm watching the pitches, and it's just the most amazing business ideas, like super cool community impact, literally every single one of them. I was like, I love that. I want that. I want to invest my own money in that. Very, very cool. And then, after I'd seen all of these great ideas, I started looking around the room, and that was when I noticed that, I don't think in 3 years of being heavily, heavily involved in the startup entrepreneur community in the greater Seattle area, have I seen a pitch competition where the audience, the presenters, and the judges were not young, white, straight men. They were everyone. It was total representation. It was really, really cool. And then something else interesting happened during the awards ceremony. So they had the overall awards for best business and runner-up, I believe. But then they also had awards for the best woman, LGBTQ, veteran, refugee, and person of color owned businesses. And to do that, they didn't take anything away from the overall business winners, right? Which is sort of your equivalent of talent above all. They just went out and secured additional sponsorships, additional money to have additional awards, which of course, all of a sudden this seems so obvious to me. Like, of course they had more diverse applicants. Of course they created a better pipeline to choose from to get those 8 amazing businesses on stage. And of course, it ended up being more diverse. So I was talking to the hosts after the events, who are good friends of mine, and I learned that even with this very impressive pool of applicants, this great pipeline, they still see that, all else being equal and trying to be as fair and blind as possible, veterans and women of color and other minority groups have a harder time getting through. And, I always smile when this happens because I kind of love it when veterans are listed as part of minority groups that are struggling, because I think it makes people pay attention. It makes people question a little bit of the unconscious bias. We still today kind of think as veterans as, wait, those are young white men. Why are they struggling to fit in here? But that's exactly the point, right? Is anytime your experience, your world experience, your work experience, your life experience is significantly different from the others in a large group, you have much more challenges in translating it into relevant data, relevant experience, or successes, and highlighting what you've done in a way that those people on those committees or those boards or, CEOs can recognize. And that's part of why that diversity is so important to get up to those high levels. So hopefully you're still with me, because we're going to talk about some things we can do now to increase diverse faces without, this idea of compromising talent, or maybe at some point it is a balance but with a real understanding that diversity, as I know for me, I learned out on, improvised explosive device laid in sand that the power of diversity wasn't making me feel good, wasn't about social justice. It was about reducing everyone's risk and making the mission more successful, which of course in the business world translates to profit. So if we truly, truly believe that, and we're truly invested in increasing our diversity and our diversity hiring and recognizing these minority contributions, here's a couple of ways. I came up with 3 pretty quick ways, at least quick to list, a bit harder to implement. But I'm sure if you ask a bunch of different people for more ways, again, diverse input, we'll find all kinds of different ideas and examples as well. So, way number 1 is showcase diverse faces in materials that represent your organization. These days, that could be all kinds of things, right? It could be videos, could be posters on the wall, could be outreach that you do, could be who you have speaking at various events. And this takes some specific planning. There's a lot of criticism about these methods being inauthentic or people being used as tokens. I don't see it that way as someone that has been a token or specifically asked to speak as a female veteran, as a military spouse, as any one of these things. It takes a little bit of work and it takes a little bit of planning to find maybe a qualified person because maybe they're not putting it out there yet. But if you look around, you'll find them. And once you do that, once your outreach materials have these more diverse faces, you'll start to see that it isn't that there are people that are highly qualified out there. It's just that the messaging you were inadvertently putting out was maybe that your place wasn't the place for them and they were applying somewhere else. Okay, so step number 1, put diverse faces on your outreach materials, your materials that represent your business. Step number 2, put diverse faces and people on your leadership teams and your outreach teams. If you think that compromises talent or is, ridiculous, the whole idea of what I'm talking about, just, I would say challenge yourself to go out and to find someone who's extremely, extremely, extremely different from you, in appearance, in mindset, in, as many things as you can find that is highly qualified. And I promise you, it won't be as hard as you think once you make it a goal and you do some planning around how to find those people. And the effects multiply very, very quickly. There's a lot of study that shows, and this applies to step 1 and step 2, but there's a lot of study that show that people want to be around people that look like them or that they feel like are like them. So unconscious bias makes us only put people like us, but consciously putting diverse faces makes us attract more diversity. I was literally once a part of putting together a veteran, so military veteran tech focused event, which is 2 communities together that both have like under 20% women almost. And we ended up with 40% women at this event, which was, impressive for a lot of reasons. But you can see some very, very quick turnaround when you do a little bit of, an authentic focus and planning on how you showcase your diverse talent. And the third thing, and this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. This is something we can all, I'm sure, work on personally and professionally. I've had to work on this for myself, and I've had to struggle against this as well. And that is listen to and believe minority voices when they recount their experiences and perceptions. I think a lot of times as leaders or just as good people in business, we hate it when we hear that we inadvertently hurt someone or offended someone, or even that somebody had a completely different experience than us. It's hard for us to believe something that wasn't our experience, but the more we practice it, the more we do it, the more we learn about other people's worldviews. So an example from my own experience is communicating to male veterans that my experience serving as a female was different from theirs. And I've gotten into some serious heated arguments with some male veterans that did not want to accept that, where they really truly believe that everything is equal, everything is the same. And of course, if you're a female veteran or probably any kind of woman watching this, you probably just inherently immediately understand that, of course, the experience was different. It's not to say bad. Sometimes it is bad, but different, which means we can all learn from appreciating and listening to those experiences. Like I said before, definitely want to say for the record, like I'm guilty of denying people's experiences. I think we all are. We are all living through this incredible culture change in our workplaces and in our culture right now. And we're all learning and we're all doing better as we know better. And from my experiences, the more diverse opinions and insights you can get, the faster you're going to know better. At the end of the day, if you can't see the difference between growing a human inside your body, birthing that human, putting your life at risk, feeding a tiny human from your body, and all of these other things that moms still do, much more than men or will always do. And if you can't see the difference between doing that while running an amazing startup and being a dad doing the same thing, then I have no further comment. I'm just so happy that Inc. magazine can see the difference and that I get to live in a world now where pregnant female CEOs can grace the cover of business magazines. Now that it's happened once, it's going to happen again. They're going to be seen as successful, respected professionals. And I can't wait to see what we consider to be newsworthy next. And of course, always remember, no company's perfect, no leader's perfect. Just remember, put your best foot forward and be great every day. Please join us on Tuesday at 2:30 Central, which is of course 12:30 in Seattle, where I'm at, to hear our live blog topics as we chat about, to give input, etc. Like I mentioned, I'm Daniella Young. I'll be popping up on screens near you at about this time every Tuesday. I am a co-founder of Cavness HR. Cavness HR is a really cool virtual HR company where we are trying to solve the problem of making big business HR available to small businesses. We're doing that through implementation and creation of some SaaS products and some virtual consulting products. So basically taking what normal big businesses pay in-house HR or expensive consultants to do and making it accessible to small businesses at their prices, on their schedule, all the time. So follow us for cool updates. I also host a podcast called the Cavness HR Culture Podcast. And in January, we'll be launching my own brand called Culture Hacking with Daniella Young. Stay tuned. Follow me on all social media. In the blog post, you can see where to find me on Twitter at Daniella M. Young and on LinkedIn. Hopefully very, very soon, we'll have some exciting news about a book that I'm writing. So stay tuned. Reach out with shout outs, with questions, with arguments. I love to fight about things and debate people and question my own opinions on everything that I just said. So thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll see you next week.